What is the scariest encounter with another human you have ever experienced? Have been home invaded 3 times, once by 2 guys who had a gun, a knife, and a bottle of petrol they splashed all over everyone, and the other 2 times by 4 dudes with knives. Got stabbed one of those times, only in the hand, but they were going for my face. Luckily, I was fast enough to catch it. Those experiences were pretty freaky and taught me a lot about how savage and animalistic people can be. I was investigating a fire for an insurance company in a fourplex in North STL. North STL is a bad area. It was clearly an arson. I had 5 separate, unconnected fires. I'd been there for a while, taking photos and doing my thing. I was drawing my diagram in the building when I hear 2 guys walking by the building on the other side of the wall. I'm straining to hear what they're saying since it could be pertinent to my investigation. The 2 guys get to the rear of the building where the fire department had ripped out the wall to be able to extinguish hot spots they'd found. I can clearly see them both standing there talking. They start to kick through the debris on the ground and one starts saying how some dumb woman had snitched on his buddy for setting this fire. He starts telling the other guy about how he's going to deal with her and pulls a god-darned pistol out of his waistband. At this point, I'm frozen in fear, about to crap my pants, hoping that they don't look 90 degrees and see me standing there like a jackass. So I crouch down as low I can without making noise and wait. They continue to talk about how it's bullcrap, she told the cops on him and blah blah. Finally, a car drives by and I use the sound of it to get out of the house out the front door. Which unfortunately wasn't super quiet since most of the floor had collapsed and I was wearing fire boots. I get to my truck across the street. I'm sitting in the driver's seat trying to unclench my butthole when the guy with the gun walks around the side of the house to the front porch, sits down, and aims it at me. I turned the truck on and got the F out of there. I ended up going back about an hour later to see if they were gone because I had to finish my scene. Still top 5 scariest moment of my career so far. I was at a sleepover at my friend's place. We decided to sneak out and wander around aimlessly. We stopped at our school, which had a small patch of trees on the grounds where the older kids hung out during lunch. There was rumors of a great Playboy collection there, hence our visit. While there, my friend stepped off to the side to have a pee. A few seconds later he comes rushing back and says, "Run." I didn't know what his deal was, but as a kid in the forest with only the light of the moon, I figured asking questions was a secondary option to being left alone there. We ran until we couldn't run anymore. Finally, my friend explained that there was some weirdo looking at him go pee. He said that he believed the guy was jerking off. Being kids with a history of pranks, I thought he was effing with me. Then I looked back and saw the guy a long way back but moving in our direction. We kept running towards my friend's place and he kept following. When we got back we thought we lost him. We snuck back inside and turned off all of the lights in the basement. We laid there silently and terrified. About 10 minutes later we see something move by the window. We knew someone was out there. We stayed completely still and quiet. A minute later we hear a noise coming from a room in the basement. We both lost it and started yelling "Dad" for my friend's dad. He came running down the stairs and we were yelling "Someone's in that room." His dad flung open the door and the window was open and there were fresh marks on the wall from someone climbing in or out. For some reason he didn't call the police. He decided to stay downstairs with us for the night. I didn't really sleep and in the morning my friend's dad made me walk home with him. A few blocks away and there were a bunch of police. As we walked by, one of the cops stopped us and asked if we saw anything suspicious last night. We told him the story, which kicked off further questioning. It turns out that a kid went missing from his room right around the same time that we got chased home. They found the guy a few days later dead from suicide. They never found the boy he abducted. We had a lot of trouble with that. My friend's dad felt guilty for not calling the police. He became addicted to sleeping pills. My friend was traumatized with just how close he came to being grabbed in the forest. He turned to drugs really young and eventually killed himself. I went through therapy for a while and still have occasional night terrors from that night, even though it happened almost 30 years ago. Drunk driver tried to mow me down on my moped down a dead-end street. Luckily I managed to get my bike up the pavement and put a parked car between me and the drunk, so he couldn't get me. Pretty intense. I had someone try to run me down in broad daylight as I pushed my 3-month-old in a stroller. I got stuck on the curb and just picked up the whole stroller and ran. When my daughter was too small to go into the bathroom by herself, I would take her into the men's room with me. Once we were at a park and my daughter and I were standing in the restroom waiting for my son to finish up, and some random, normal-looking middle-aged guy came in to use the urinal. When he finished, he turned around with his penis still hanging out, took 2 steps towards my 3-year-old daughter and waved his penis in her face, then made a beeline for the door. It happened so quickly and was so unexpected that I was too stunned to react for a moment. Once I realized what had just happened, I ran out to find him, but he was gone. He must have raced straight into the woods to hide or something. At the time, I was furious that he got away, but in retrospect it was the best thing that could have happened. I was experiencing the sort of blind rage, where if I'd embraced it even a little, I'd have completely lost control, and I wanted to embrace that rage a lot. I shudder to think about what I might have done to that guy in front of my kids, and the likely legal consequences I could have faced. Me and my boyfriend came back at like 2 a.m. from a night out. We were both quite drunk and stumbled into the hallway to the elevator when we see drops of something on the floor. It definitely was blood. Fresh and wet. The elevator button and door were covered in bloody handprints as well. My boyfriend called the elevator, pushing me aside not knowing what would be in it. Luckily nothing except for a puddle of blood. The elevator came from the 5th floor. So we went investigating. The trail of blood ended at a door with huge hand smears of blood on the door. It took all our courage to ring, not the nicest place to live, robbery? But I am so glad we did. An elderly man opened the door. He looked like straight out of a horror movie. Covered in blood from head to toe. His gray sweater was red. His hair was wet. His shoes were filled with blood. We immediately sobered up. I called an ambulance which arrived in 2 minutes. My boyfriend went inside the flat helping the man sit down. There was so much blood I have never seen that in my life. We didn't know what happened to him until we met him yesterday properly for the first time. Recognized my boyfriend's glasses. He was drunk, wanted to ride his bike home, crashed somehow and got a huge cut on his head. He takes heart medicine which thins his blood, that's why he lost so much. If we wouldn't have rung the doorbell, he would have bled to death. He actually gifted us money and a super expensive bottle of champagne for something completely self-explanatory. I was up in my 3rd floor bedroom having just had a spliff chilling to music with my headphones on when I started to hear weird noises. Naturally I just thought it was because I was stoned, but it was weird enough for me to take my headphones off. I listened for a bit and coming from downstairs was a creepy voice I didn't recognize mixed in with John's, my housemate's, voice, but he sounded like he was in pain. I was like WTF, so I started walking slowly down my stairs and then looked into his room and saw John on his floor holding his eyes in pain with a big dude in a hoodie shouting at him and then grabbing things off the shelves. The next thing I knew, autopilot had kicked in and I ran towards the room and the hooded dude turned, ran out the door when I smashed into him, making us both go tumbling down the staircase, trying to exchange punches on the way down. We scuffled a bit in the hallway until he eventually ran out the door. It transpired that John, who at that time was on crutches, was hobbling home and went to open our front door, when the hooded dude came up behind him and pepper sprayed him in his face, blinding him. He then took him up to his bedroom to rob him and his stuff. Poor guy had to have iPads on for the next 2 days. Anyway, it was all pretty effed up, but John was okay in the end, and honestly I was so stoned it didn't really feel like it was happening at the time. Was like a bad trip. All moved out 2 weeks later. Was Brixton in London. Late 80s, was running errands in town with my mom and 2 sisters. Back then it wasn't uncommon to leave your kids in the car while you ran inside the store. We are sitting in the car waiting, and then I see an older guy walking towards our car. I just get a really bad feeling and start yelling at my sisters to lock the doors, while I lock the 2 on my side. He comes over and spends the next couple of minutes trying to open all the doors on the car while we are cowering in our seats. Eventually he gave up and left. We were all 8 and under in age at the time. I just knew that if he got in the car he would take one of us. This happened at our local grocery store 6-ish years ago. A mom left her 10-year-old daughter unattended in the car. It was hot out so the windows were down. A man noticed the kid and ran over to the car, yanking the girl by her hair and arms trying to pull her through the window. The girl started screaming, which caught the attention of another guy who came to her rescue and fought her attacker off. Police never found the creep or the truck he took off in. That little girl, had she not fought as hard as she did and without the help of guy number 2, would be dead or worse right now. No matter the year, the temperature, the location or type of store, never leave your kids unattended in the car. There's too many things that could go wrong. I'm sorry you and your siblings went through this op. My landlord's brother was high on angel dust and held me hostage for several hours. He was partially retarded, so I was able to drift his thoughts toward French toast and bong hits. I charmed my way out of getting raped and murdered. I will never forget his face in the bathroom mirror as he held my bleeding hands under the faucet water, while berating me, eye to eye, in the mirror. So scary. Back in the early 90s I worked as a night auditor for a small motel in Prospect Heights, Illinois. I was a young mother and worked nights while my husband worked days. Occasionally, my husband would stop by and check on me. It was a brutal schedule and I truly don't know how I made it on only a couple hours of sleep each day. But I digress. My job was to perform a daily audit on the rooms and money. Also, I would check people in and out of the hotel. The hours were midnight to 8 in the morning. One night I had finished my audit and was watching a scary movie on the little TV they had behind the front desk. It was winter and very cold. A man came up to the door and he was wearing a ski mask. For a second, I thought it was my husband, so I kind of smiled. He came up to the front desk and I asked if I could help him. He asked me why I had smiled at him. Well, I knew right then I was in trouble. He waved a big knife at me and told me to turn around. I felt the most fear then. I felt like I was going to die. He hopped over the front desk and cut one of the phone lines and took the money. I had my coat and purse back there and he took those as well. As he left he said, "I have your purse, I know where you live now." I stayed hunched in the corner behind the front desk as he left. Then I realized he had only cut the handset to one phone and the main line on another, so I took the handset from one phone and attached it to another where he had not cut the main line. I dialed 911 and got an operator on the line. Just as I was about to talk, the guy came back. Apparently, he had dropped his knife behind the desk. I saw it on the floor as he came around. I picked it up. In my mind I'm thinking, can I stab him? We stood there kind of facing each other. Me in my uniform and this big guy in a thick ski jacket. He demanded I give him the knife. I truly thought if I tried to stab him I would lose and he would kill me. I gave him the knife. He took the knife and hit me over the head with the handle of the knife a couple of times and then left. The police soon came and I recounted my story. As far as I know, he was never caught. The place I worked for let me have a day off, but when I needed more, I had head injuries, they fired me. It turns out, they had been robbed a few times before but had never put in security. I did take them to court for lost wages and I won. About a year later, maybe less, I saw on the news that a night auditor/clerk at the same hotel had been kidnapped from the motel, raped, stabbed and left for dead. They caught that guy and he is now in prison. I am literally shaking as I type this. It's been so long, but I rarely talk about this or I just laugh it off like it was no big thing. Obviously it still affects me greatly. Scariest night of my life. The hotel, when I worked there, was an Econo Lodge, but they apparently changed the name soon after I left, to Forest Lodge. So when the story about the kidnapped clerk came on the news, I didn't immediately realize it was the same motel. Until they showed a photo of the motel. Then I knew and it scared the crap out of me. My father. He was a piece of crap sperm donor and the time he was barely in my life he messed me up. I remember my mother telling me to run when he came home angry or drunk, to lock my bedroom door and turn on the TV. I could hear him screaming, breaking things, beating up my mother, banging on my door, trying to bust in. Police coming, my mother crying, him being back that same night or next morning and hit repeat. Sometimes she couldn't do anything and I would be involved, and he would use me as a punching bag and I would be thrown around like a rag doll. He would rip my mother's clothes off and force himself on her in front of me. He would always be let go because he had friends that were police officers. One night I woke up and heard my mother crying and went to our front door that lead to the apartment stairs and opened the door to look down. I remember I said something but don't know what and saw my mother bleeding and her shirt ripped off. He came up the stairs and I looked up and remember him punching me hard, not sure if he punched more than once but remember my head hitting the coffee table and nothing else. I don't remember what happened days after or anything, but remember the judge giving my father weekend custody of me and me crying whenever I was forced to be with him. He would act like a different person in public and sometimes at home, and out of nowhere he would be someone else. He eventually stopped picking me up and never saw me again. I was around 5, but he left his mark. I remember him shooting up with me in the car, drinking and driving with me, touching me and other kids, him pulling out a gun or knife at people, and so on. He was a very scary person to be around and left destruction to anyone of the female gender he stayed close to. Was trying to take my girlfriend to the hospital since we thought she had appendicitis or something. It's like 12:30 a.m. on a Sunday in Fayetteville, NC, which, if you don't know, is an absolute crap hole. We get 2 streets away from where we were living when we come across this street racing type car, neon lights on the rims and stuff, pulled out halfway into the road. I stop and wait a while for it to move and it doesn't. So I pull around it and keep going. The car accelerates and cuts me off around the bend. It slows down and won't let me past. A second car pulls up on the right, a third car pulls up on the left. At this point we're boxed in. A young black guy wearing a white tank top and khaki shorts gets out of the car holding a pistol. Someone else in the car hands him a blue bandana, then he starts walking towards us. At this point I'm starting to realize that this is too many people for a robbery, and there was a reason for him being handed the bandana, and it's probably a gang initiation. So I throw the car in reverse and bump a fourth car I hadn't been looking at because I was looking at the guy with the effing gun. I throw it forward and go to squeeze past the car on the left and the front car when the guy started shooting. He fired 3 shots, that thankfully didn't hit either of us. It's important to mention that at this point we're on sort of a back road a bit away from a 4-way intersection with a stoplight. Across the street there's a shopping center with a 24-hour grocery store across the street. I speed through the red light with the intention of going to the store and asking for help. Before I can make it across, we get T-boned on the passenger side by a completely unrelated vehicle that was going 55 miles per hour. Car span out, ended up on the side of the road and was totaled. The guys in the cars effed off once other people were involved. I ended up getting a traumatic brain injury and whiplash from the car accident and was paranoid as hell for a very long time afterwards. Girlfriend ended up mostly okay, some bruised ribs and whiplash as well. Watching TV when I'm suddenly face to face with a SWAT dude pointing a pistol at my face. Anonymous call/wrong address that nearly got me shot. Shake my head. This was before swatting was a thing, by the way.